What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Death and Narratives podcast. I got Conrad here. We're going to do a war update and talk about just some random topics. Anything you want to start out with?
Yeah, I'll just essentially say that everything is basically happening in the way that we pretty much have said it was going to happen the whole time. Like, this war is not ending. It's not going to end anytime soon. We just passed day 100 of the war. There's no end in sight. There's renewed escalations in violence over the last week, which most likely are going to result in a renewed kind of phase of the war where there's just continuous violence. But let's just be clear too. Even if they somehow work out some kind of deal, which I don't know how anyone's going to negotiate with the Israelis and the Americans at this point, but they're doing it. They're still maintaining some kind of dialogue, but even if they end up doing that, it doesn't matter. Like, this thing is just going to keep going on and on and on. There's no real way out of this, and we're going to see, what is probably the most dramatic event in American history, well, for the last 70 years, 80 years, just become even more dramatic.
World history, I think, in the last 100 years.
Yeah, it's 70. Yeah, for sure. I would say at a certain level, I think that the Ukraine war is actually a much more dramatic event than this. This is at least in terms of the violence. Mm-hmm. It's a much more. It's just sort of a skirmish level event. Like maybe a few thousand people died, which is a lot of people. I'm not saying that's it's not tragic for everybody who's lost somebody in this war, but the Ukraine war is at such a violent intensity that it's millions of Ukrainians have died and hundreds of thousands of Russians have died probably at this point. And the economic impacts of that war were also pretty significant. But I don't know. This is probably, this is a transformation of America as an imperial hegemon, which has been in decline for the last probably 25 years. Now it's in a rapid state of deterioration. Ukraine and the Russia conflict knocked it down significantly, and this is pretty much knocked it down to the point where it's losing sway in the Middle East. Realistically, when we step back and look at this from a historical perspective, this will probably be the end of an American presence in the Middle East. This is going to be the end of Israeli dominance in the Middle East, and I think it's been shown to be that. And what it's going to be for at least probably a decade or two, it's going to show that Iran is a extremely powerful regional force for the foreseeable future. That's going to be the case. And but right now it looks to be the case that Iran is the fourth most powerful nation in the world, and we'll see. It's not that big a country compared to something like India or even Brazil, or Nigeria, which has a larger population, or even Bangladesh has a larger population than Iran, but we're seeing that the control of resources in going forward into the world is, and especially like petrochemicals, is something that that you just you can't ignore. You can't really say
Yeah.
that it actually is. It used to be flipped, right, where the the countries that are being supplied had all of the power. The countries that are the imperialist countries that are have industry that is super substantial are the ones which are dictating terms to the rest of the world, which are colonizing the rest of the world. Now, we're seeing a flip on that, where um, the suppliers, which I think it's been trending to that for a while, but the suppliers are now becoming the forces that have the cards, and,
Totally.
I think we're in a phase of the world right now where one great power, which has been dominant for, I mean, not an extremely long time, but like
70 years or so.
yes, 70 years, which may seem like a long time for, in terms of the lifespan of one person, but historically it's relatively short, and probably on par with what most imperial ranges and lifespans are. Well, we're seeing that we're closing in on the end of American dominance over the globe, at least. Maybe not over its hemisphere, but um, it's a big shift. Big things are happening, and we're living through history right now. We're living through very important historical moments, which I mean, I don't think a lot of people realized were nearby. Even in like the
Right.
90s, people were thinking that America was going to be on top for maybe even another century.
Yeah. Yeah, I did this very interesting bit of analysis you did about maybe we'll call it like the what was called the resource curse. How that if you had a very resourceful country, which was maybe a second or third world country, that was considered a curse because there were always going to be outside imperialistic powers that were more industrially developed, which therefore meant more militarily developed, would come in and sort of rape you and take your resources and fight over you. And even if they weren't really taking your resources and making you a proxy of them, they were just causing chaos to fight over them. Now that sort of dialectic has been reversed, where now these countries that were highly industrialized, highly specialized militaries, imperialist countries, which maybe don't have as many resources. I'm thinking Europe especially, which isn't very energy rich. Now they are starting to realize that their military is degraded, their industrial base is degraded, and they don't really have much leverage over these countries that they've just been swindling. And so these countries, as they start to develop, as they inevitably start to make their own power blocks, start to expel foreign invaders, and overturn predatory financial situations that they found themselves in, whether it's through the IMF or the World Bank or what have you, they seem to find themselves with all the cards because they have now the resources, they have a growing population, they have a growing economy, and it's sort of like when we went to Vietnam and we saw, wow, even though we have been more developed for longer, our development has stagnated, and so we barely have new things. And when you go to Vietnam, if there's a new thing, it's totally new. If there's a skyscraper, there's totally new technology in it. Versus in America, it's like if there's a skyscraper built, it kind of just looks like anything that could have been built in the 90s, pretty much, right? So you're seeing this maladjusted economy globally is now, it's horseshoed around, right? It's like if you depress the development of all these countries, eventually when they do develop, their development is going to be so much more advanced because they're going to be doing it more recently, right? If you built a bridge now in Iran, the one they bombed was like one of the most advanced. It was one of the longest bridges in West Asia, America, a bridge like that would have been built in the 70s and would have had much older infrastructure, right? Look at the Key Bridge in Baltimore, got fucking taken out by a goddamn boat, right? So this is the contradiction in depressing some of these countries' development, is that, well, now you set them up once they finally do have the time and space to be crafty, to make their economies flourish. Now they're very adept. They're very adaptable, and Iran is a perfect example of this. Okay, we're going to put sanctions on them. We're not going to sell them, weapons or anything. And they're like, all right, well, we'll develop our own highly robust force of intermediate range ballistic missiles, even hypersonic missiles, which we, for a small cost, considering what most hypersonic missile development costs, and with a highly educated population, are going to invest in that. And because they've invested in that, they don't need F-35s. They don't need a highly mobile navy. They don't need destroyers, because they've invested in something that is sort of a trump card, versus America. We don't have any hypersonic missiles, right? But we have this huge military machine that was built up, kind of post World War II, and they have all these things, but they haven't really focused on like actually developing one core simple thing like that. So this is the total reversal that's happening, and it's happening on so many different planes. And I think if you compare Iran to Venezuela, it's the perfect dichotomy of the old versus the new. Venezuela is the aberration of the old, which is this idea that we can, through our soft power and our sanctions and our spying and our CIA grifting and our probably outright bribing of people, we can convince large parts of a domestic population, even its ruling government, that if they don't placate our demands, we will destroy their country, even if that may not necessarily be the case. And even if, there were to be a war, it might not be as close as we think it is. But they convince people through these auspicious shows of force and through bribing certain people and through decapitation strikes. And they make them submit before they even have a chance to fight back. And that's what happened in Venezuela. And so many times has that happened throughout history, where we've done some sort of coup d'etat, some sort of CIA backroom deal. Maybe there's some uprisings, there's some things, but it's almost like before the real battle begins, it seems like, oh man, the Americans, they're everywhere, they've got it all figured out, and we're fucked, there's nothing we can do. That Iran has totally flipped that on its head, because they've totally rejected every single premise of that plan, in that they did get a decapitation strike, they did fight back, they did continue to have dialogue with the Americans, even though they know it's going to go nowhere, but they continue to, just to show that they had the diplomatic prowess to do that. and to show the rest of the world that these people who are throwing this bone to diplomatically are liars. And since they maintained that struggle against the Americans and they never backed down, what they did is they showed other countries like Venezuela, because they're similar. They're both oil rich, both sanctioned, both large domestic population, which have revolutionary, political aspirations, right, and histories. And, why necessarily did one stand up and one laid over? I can't necessarily say that, but I think it shows what Iran did shows other countries, because like we were saying, Iran has de facto become a superpower, but in the midst of every other country, it's still in reality, in terms of its population, in terms of maybe its even development, it's still a middling power when you look at it on paper, right? But it's their culture and it's their tactics and their ideology, which they've leveraged so perfectly, right, that makes them punch above their weight class. And I think you're beginning to see this now, and I wonder what you think of this, because, Pakistan, this is a really interesting emerging thing that's happening where, Pakistan has historically been a U.S. proxy. As you're maybe aware, this dude Imran Khan was about to be a leader of the country, and he was, henceforth sort of overthrown, kind of cooed, kind of swept away by the Pakistani military and political establishment, kind of ISI establishment, which are, the Pakistani intelligence, ISI, which is work closely with CIA a lot, in the region. They have nukes, Pakistan, so they're not afraid of getting, invaded by America, because they know they kind of have the anti-Saddam option, right? But they have worked with them a lot and been a proxy of them in a lot of ways. But now it seems, as they were trying to triangulate and sort of get some diplomatic, golden stars for being like, hey, well, we're a neighbor with Iran and we're close with the Americans, why don't we try to be the diplomats here and make a deal? They're beginning to, I think, find their independence in this region. And I think what we're seeing is a new power block coming into view in Western Asia, where, Pakistan with its nuclear umbrella, Iran with its cultural pride to fight, to actually fight against these things, and their medium-range ballistic missile weaponry, and along with other partners who are now slowly acceding to what could be a new power block, right? Kind of blowing the GCC up. You had
Qatar.
Right, exactly. You had Qatar. Oman, of course, is making strides with the Strait of Hormuz. They are also have a toll there and are coordinating with the Iranians. And now even Egypt. So Egypt, Turkey, I believe Saudi Arabia. I can't remember who else. Maybe one other country. They originally met as sort of this, Sunni axis, early on in the war, and I think what's happening now is that axis is starting to merge with the Pakistan Iran axis, because you did have Pakistan send a lot of infantry troops to Saudi Arabia, I think 2 to 3 weeks ago, under there, because they do have a mutual defense pact. And I think what we could see happen in the near to long-term future is that as America and Israel start to get destroyed and ran out of the region, you have these new players who are going to be, they're going to be the new security guarantee for the region. That will be Iran with its missile technology, Pakistan with its large standing army, Saudi Arabia with its a lot amount of energy, same with Turkey and Egypt, large armies, right? Much larger than Israel's, And I think, there are even signals, and I think Pepe Escobar reported on this. There are even signals that people in the UAE are starting to realize their strategic failure in this whole foray, this whole fantastical foray that they could try and destroy Iran, even after they immediately destroyed 20% of their oil production capacity. What do you think of this? Like, what is West Asia going to look like once America's gone? I guess is kind of the question, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna begin with. I think whatever Iran kind of wants it to look like, I think is initially how that part of the world is going to shape up. I think there's I mean, you said a lot there. There's a couple things that I definitely wanted to build on. Um, you know, when you look at why Iran is so dominant and why world powers become dominant, I'm a big proponent of. I can't remember who said this, but the concept that geography is destiny, that it's not really like an individual people or society that leads to them becoming this like great powerful empire. It's really just sort of a simple matter of geography. You know, you look at like Britain's rise to becoming the hegemon in Europe, where they became the dominant force um, in the colonial world, where all these European powers who had like this technological advantage and this military advantage over the world, why were they so dominant? And then why did Britain, which is a small country, become the greatest power in the world for a period of time, for maybe 100 years or something like that? Well, I think you can kind of come to the conclusion that if you look at those like tightly packed European countries that were contenders, they didn't have the advantage of having the English Channel.
Right.
France and Germany and Spain, they're all packed in there and they're fighting each other and they're locked in these war cycles every few decades. And then all of a sudden, the one that comes out on top is the one that doesn't have to deal with invading armies just marching across the border. They've got just big strategic geographic boundary. And similar thing with the United States, right?
Right.
Why did the United States overtake Europe as the colonial Western hegemon, and really largely why did it overtake Great Britain and Germany? It's because is it because the United States was more technologically advanced, or more had larger? Maybe it was because it had a larger industrial base.
It's because we're just better. We're just better, man.
Right. But I think realistically, like during World War I and World War II, there was never any capacity for the Germans to. The Germans were fighting the British and the French, and they were the ones who were dying, and the Germans had no capacity to invade the United States. So we had the Atlantic Ocean between us.
Right.
There's no conceivable way that they could have landed an army in in North America. And same thing when we're looking at Iran now becoming it's at least a regional power, potentially potentially a great power for a time. Strategically now its geography, which one is very mountainous and incompatible with America's strategic capacity to wage war, which is bombing campaigns. But also, it's in control of a channel which happens to hold 20% of the world's oil production, at least. So when we're looking at the way that the world is shifting and the way that region is shifting, what I would say is that if you're looking at geography as a better predictor long term than anything else, and we're gonna see um, a continuation where these Gulf states, at least that which are basically creations of Europe and creations of the United States, they can't really exist in a vacuum without the support of something else. Um, they're going to either defect to Iran or at least down the line, they're not really going to exist in the ways that they exist today. Um, and I don't think Iran is a is an incredibly ambitious country. It's ruled. I don't think it's ruled by ambitious people. We'll see. I mean, these things tend to down the line. Power sort of corrupts individuals as it becomes a power. If a world power becomes too powerful for too long, the leadership becomes corrupt, as we see here in the United States, where the entire leadership of the United States is built on corruption. But yeah, that part of the world is going to be dictated by the most powerful country and the pace that they set and the policies that they put in place. And right now, it doesn't seem like there's any indications that the Iranians are an imperial nation, that they have any sort of imperial goals or ambitions for extending their, at least their boundaries, their their sphere of influence potentially. The policies that they want, they're going to get. And, I can see that the toll that they're going to set up on the Strait of Hormuz, I think that's going to become a permanent fixture, and I think they're going to become an extremely wealthy country because of that, for a period of time. That is potentially going to be a corrupting influence on that nation, which, as we know, like hardship kind of builds character, wealth builds corruption. Um, so I'm not entirely sure what the outcome of that will be. We know any sort of empire follows the same cycle. They're not going to be in control forever.
Right.
But on a larger scale, I think this is just setting an example for the rest of the world. Um, this is going to be a greater trend that follows. The United States is essentially influential in every single country in the world other than Russia, China, although maybe not necessarily. We could even make an argument that the United States is influential in China, but
Yeah.
it's not influential in North Korea. It doesn't really hold much influence in a place like Cuba, and Iran now. But all the rest of the world, the United States is a dominant power, which can influence policy in every single country around the world, and largely achieve that policy. And right now, I think we are witnessing a reversal of that hegemony, and essentially an end of that hegemony.
Right. It makes it defunct because of that. It doesn't have to happen in every single state. Like this, what's happening in Iran doesn't have to take place in Tanzania and Somalia, like simultaneously, right?
Right.
Because now it's proven to people, because they see it, right?
Right.
So now other countries can sort of make these moves, and I'll tell you what, as soon enough, I mean, it's already a cascading effect what's happening. Sorry, I'm a little I think I'm getting a little sick or something, or have some allergies, but Russia was kind of the first card, like you said, the Ukraine war. That was like the first, like, hey, the U.S. and the West will wage war against you, on a large scale, not just do some proxy, not just do some, they'll literally, target your nuclear triad type of things, right, which Ukraine has done. They'll cut you off from the financial system. They'll create no other option for you but to lay down, die, get raped and destroyed, torn asunder, or to fight back. And that happened to Russia, and they chose, okay, we'll fight back. And not only did they survive, they actually started to thrive. China did that with the tariff wars. It's not kinetic, but they did that same thing. The tariff wars, Trump 1 and 2. Now Iran's doing that with, an air campaign. And so who's next, right? I think this is going to accelerate. This is going to accelerate more and more and more. And it won't just be like Cuba, they survived, No, it's going to be like whoever's next. I don't know. Pull a name out of a hat. Peru, they thrived or something, after not only fighting against rebuffing, but courting power. Because what Iran's done, what Russia and China has done is by proving that they can take on the Americans, right? They create themselves as superpowers and regional powers. Because now they're de facto as powerful, at least in their own region, as the United States, which is the global hegemon, right? Soon enough, that won't mean that much because everyone will be like, oh, well, the fucking Yemenis, fought them off, so, like, whatever. It doesn't mean that, But for right now, it means a lot. We still have a large military. We still have a large economic presence. We still have, like you said, we pull strings in every single country around the world, and we still have a lot of strings to pull. So there's still a lot to happen, but as we said with this analysis, it's just a logical conclusion to what's happening, and you're not going to be able to stop what's happening. There will not be this delusion that, like, the stock market and oil people, I think, which is like, because obviously their wealth and life, whole ideology depends on it, but that this is just, some silly mistake, some Trump thing, maybe at the worst it's a new Iraq war, Afghanistan thing, and after a while we'll be able to get back to where we were, and stock market will be back at 50,000 or whatever, and it'll just we'll buy the dip, we'll buy low, we'll sell high for the next 20 years, and hope the bonds get. No, I don't think that is the case. I think, like we both said, this will be a downward spiral, a continuing, accelerating downward spiral. And I think what Iran has done is they have, with one foul swoop within you, like you said, it's been 100 days, which I didn't know. I quite like that figure. Day 100, right? And as you told me before this, there are ongoing current strikes, and I think. Right.
It was supposed to be a 2-week war, according to the president.
Right. This is like a 2-hour strike to a 2-week war to 4-week diplomatic route to now it's day 100. And, I think the reason why we're so right all the time, the reason why our analysis is bearing fruit is because we understand how America and Israel think. It's, and this is important too. This is a very interesting point you brought up. Pakistan, Iran, they don't have as many people as India. Okay. Right. But how does their president think? How does their foreign minister, which actually their foreign minister, is probably one of the smarter people in that government, but how does their culture and their thought influence strategically them on the world stage, the battlefield, the economic, whatever? You can punch above your weight class and you can punch below your weight class. Pakistan getting a nuke very early on, sort of doing the Turkey thing, playing with the Americans, playing with the Middle East. I'm a friendly neighbor, but I also work with the Americans, right? Doing that was as brutal as it was to do something like get rid of Imran Khan, a true populist who would have democratically done a lot of great things, I'm sure, for the country. They were realist in that sense. And as you can tell by the moves they made during the India-Pakistan jet standoff, jet battle, I guess, where they won handily, not because they had necessarily more resources or more people or more military prowess, but because they were smart enough to pick the country that makes the best shit. That's China, right? You know, India, with this sort of internalized neocolonialism, has kind of bought into this anti-China Quad thing, right? So they obviously are going to buy more NATO weaponry. But it's just a silly decision. It's just a stupid decision. And it's not made from a pragmatic or realist perspective. And it's made from a cultural bias, basically, to buy these weapons. And so it doesn't really matter how much they cost or how many of them you buy. If they're obsolete when fighting against another weapon, you're going to lose, simply. You're going to lose. Doesn't matter how many you throw at them, right? So this is the same thing with Iran. If they've invested in Shahed drones, right, and all these missiles, they make Hellfire missiles obsolete. They make aircraft carriers obsolete. So it doesn't matter how much you throw at them, because from a military tactical point of view, they're obsolete, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter what you have. It's about how you use it, of course, right? Mm-hmm. And that comes from your psychology, your cultural, your history, and how smart you are, how scrappy you are, right? And a lot of countries are smarter and scrappier because they've had to deal with horrible things that America's done to them to survive than America has. So that's going to bear fruit for a lot of these countries, you know?
I think one pretty significant aspect of this war is that it really proves that America has lost the global arms race.
Right.
And I think, we see this sort of our military-industrial complex, which I don't believe that we have a military-industrial complex as much as a military-financial complex.
Yes.
It can't keep pace with really simple developments that countries like Russia and Iran have established, where they're making drones, Shahed drones, that cost $20,000, that it takes $4 million worth of Patriot missiles to shoot them down. Where it doesn't really matter if the Shahed drone hits its target if a Patriot missile is fired, and then they won that exchange.
Right.
$20,000 versus $4 million. Yeah, we got more money than them, sure, but like at the end of the day, that's, I don't know what kind of ratio that is. What, 100 to 1 in terms of expenses? Is it more than that?
It's 200 to 1 or something, right?
Yeah.
War is about logistics. So if you can outlast them, if you can draw down their reserves faster than they're drawing down your reserves, it doesn't matter where you've started, right? If you're Iran and here's America and it's going like this, Iran's going to win. It doesn't matter where you started. It matters the rate of depletion of your resources, right?
Right.
And your strategy.
The other thing that I think this is exposed, this conflict is exposed, and I think something we're building to, which we haven't gotten there yet, but I believe in this conflict that it's going to happen, is we're building to a nullification of old school naval warfare. Naval supremacy, as the United States has known it and created it, has been in the image of the aircraft carrier, which it used to gain dominance over Japan in World War II. And it has used aircraft carriers ever since then as if they are sort of an end point of naval supremacy. But I think what we're witnessing right now, and it really something that began in the Falkland campaign, where Britain retook the Falkland Islands from Argentina, but they launched some missiles at their ships, and they weren't really as durable as as they were previously expected to be.
Right.
But now we're seeing that this massive fleet, this massive naval fleet that the United States employs, which I think has previously, it's been effective in the campaigns that it's waged before. Um, I think it's shown at this point that it doesn't really matter anymore because they have drones and missiles that can take them down, and there's not much that they can do to stop even these Shahed drones,
Right.
which they haven't even. I don't think they've even launched their hypersonics at them. They could. I think they could sink them if they wanted to,
Oh,
but they've
for
been
sure.
holding back. And I think we are going to see a U.S. warship sink. Gets that's my belief.
That's a good
I mean,
prediction for the EP. Yeah, and I totally agree with
yeah.
that.
I don't know. I don't know when it's going to happen. It's really up to the Iranians at what point they decide, and also up to the Americans too, because they could simply just comply with Iran's terms and stop bringing warships into the region, but they're not going to do that. And oh, did I cut out?
You're
Shit.
still here.
Okay.
Just degrade a little bit.
Yeah. But I think this is a transformation in warfare. Warfare, in military tactics and warfare, they change constantly. As the world evolves, and there's been an evolution of warfare for thousands of years, and it's sped up. But the United States has just fallen behind,
Yeah.
and it's become complacent, and it's become ineffective in its military. Completely, I think, ineffective in its development of new technologies.
Yeah.
It's not used. It's just not prepared for fighting wars on equal terms.
Yeah.
It's like somebody's just a bully, and they're used to bullying people who are smaller than them, and then all of a sudden somebody's the same size as them, and they've been used to just. They're not used to actually having to engage in a combat with somebody who's on equal footing, and then they're getting their ass kicked because they're coming in with the same types of tactics that they were using against, beating up. So they just beat some 20-year-old is beating up 8-year-olds all the time.
Yeah.
Now they're beating it. They have to fight another 20-year-old that's the same size as them, and it's like they can't handle it. They can't handle the heat.
Or let me give a counterexample. It's also sort of like if you're a heavyweight boxer, right? And you box other heavyweight boxers, and your strategy is very precise one-time knockouts that you wait and wait and wait, and then you try to have a precision one time, all your force to knock this person out, and then you go fight some jiu-jitsu, judo, bantamweight, Thai little guy, and you're like, I'll take this fucking guy, but he'll run in circles around you. He'll run in circles and he'll kick your fucking shins, and he'll go for 20 rounds, and he'll just keep going and going and going and go, and you can barely. And you gas out, and he runs circles around you and just jabs you and kicks you, and over time degrades you. And I think the best example of this is like we've been talking about with the drone warfare is Hezbollah, because look at Hezbollah, who recently, as recent as a few years ago, had most of their public leaders decapitated in a fucking pager and crazy assassinations, and they were like, okay, we're going to go underground and rebuild and get new supply lines. They were getting supplies through Syria from, Iran and other allies, and Syria fell, and a lot of their leaders died, got assassinated, and you'd look at that and you go, well, fucking good luck to these people, not a national army, just a bunch of volunteers, with some political coalition, some militias, and, people they give benefits to, some organizing. But look at them now. They are spanking the Israeli military in southern Beirut. Right. They're spanking them with what? Not with Shahed drones. They're spanking them with wired FPV drones that they attach an RPG munition to. Okay, and I'm on the Telegram channels and I see it's almost annoying how many fucking videos these people put out, and because they put out 15 or 20 of them a day. And it's a great propaganda tool too, because it's literally a video of you flying an explosives at a stupid Israeli fucking piece of shit and exploding them. And they do it every day, and they do it multiple times, and they get officers, they get large vehicles, they get Merkava tanks, and they're spanking them with very little amount of resources. And my question is, man, if only there was a war that had been happening for the past 6 years that one of Israel's greatest allies could have studied drone warfare. If only. Like, and see, this is the thing. I think Douglas McGregor talked about this. How fucking stupid is the U.S. military that we have not, because you know the Russians, you know the Chinese, and you know the Iranians are all smart people. They're all engineers, they're chess players, they're historians, they're writers, they're poets, they're military, tacticians, strategists. They play Go, you know what I mean? They do all this shit, and they're studying this, and they're developing this. They're agile is what we'd call that in the technology industry, not to sound like too much of a faggot. They're agile. They have these cycles. They see something, they learn from it, they develop a prototype, they test it, they do it again. That's what the agile cycle is, right? And the Iranians have done this, the Russians have done this, the Chinese have done this, the North Koreans have done this, and they've all collaborated on this, right? So that Shahed 136, right, was based on a Jiran, then a Russian Jiran was based on a previous Iranian, right? So they're back and forth swapping all this technology and collaborating and iterating. And that's what you need to win wars, because, like you mentioned, war always changes, right? It's always developing. And what does it develop with? Technology, right? So if you're not at the breakneck pace at which technology is developing, then you're not going to win a war, period, point blank. If you look at Ukraine, the drone warfare develops so fast. It develops week on week, literally, because once you start doing the FPV drones, then you start, we'll just jam them, right? And then that's where Hezbollah comes in and say, like, oh yeah, well we have wired drones, right? So you have, and then you're like, but we have these complex set of nets and wires to and whatever. So physical, digital, explosive. You have all these things that you're constantly tweaking in order to, keep at the pace of the technological change of warfare. America cannot keep up with that. Yeah. They're just not agile enough, And this is why all the tech bros are they're wanting and starting to try and break into the military-industrial complex, because they're like, hey, I move fast and I break things. Boeing, it's just the problem with American hegemony is Boeing's too big and they can't make decisions, But both of them are retarded, Boeing's too big, and they're financially fleecing the American government, right? They don't, as we've said, they don't want to make the best weaponry for the cheapest cost at the largest scale. They don't. They want to make the most expensive weaponry at the lowest rate that they can make it for the most amount of money, so that they can get the most amount of money, right? Inversely, the tech bros, they don't want to make anything. Maybe they want to make some drones, but I haven't really seen Anduril do much, What they really want to do is make software, not make any physical thing. They want to make software and AI take over labor of the government and sell that to the government so that they can make even wider margins, because they literally don't make anything. They just code some shit, and then they sell it to the Pentagon and say, you don't actually need missiles. You don't need new missiles. You don't need a better army. You just need to know, you got to ask AI where to send the missiles. That'll really do it. That's what's really, So they're both out to fucking lunch because, you know, in modern warfare, shout out Call of Duty. In modern warfare, you can't do that. You need to study what's happening on the ground. You need to copy it. Shout out China, right? That's what they do. They got industrialized. They copied everything they were building, and then they made their own versions. All these countries have done this. If you have sanctions, you'll do this too. See, this is the
Right.
inverse. This is the problem. This is the contradictory problem. If you're used to, okay, I fucking don't have much resources and I can't buy this thing, how do I jerry rig something together? America never has to do that. We never have to do that, bro. If you live on an island, and you don't get a lot of fucking commodities, you have to be scrappy. You have to put shit together all the time. America never has to do that. Motherfuckers buy shit off of Amazon that they have in their shed out back that they just don't want to dust off, okay? So we don't do that's a problem. We don't do that. So we're totally out to lunch because we can't keep up with this pace because we don't have I mean we could, but we don't have the culture, right? We don't have the ideology where people actually believe in what America's doing and want to patriotically do some central planning and have that both be centralized, cheap at cost, but also fast, adaptable, and creative. You need that some sort of creative vision, right, to like solve these problems. That's just America doesn't have that. It's gray, it's bland, it's financialized, and it's slow.
I think also one of the main reasons when we look at why America is losing right now is there's a problem of what is the actual motivating factor for not necessarily the people who are not the ruling class, like we know what their motivation is, but the people who are actually waging the war.
Yeah.
What is their motivation? And at the end of the day, their motivation is not going to be anywhere close to what the motivation of Iran is, which is survival. Any American who is in the military, they do not have the motivation, or adjacent to the military, like the military industrial complex, they do not have the motivation to really substantially make sure they achieve those ends. Because at the end of the day, if they lose, it doesn't really matter. If the Iranians lose, that's the end of their civilization. That means their children could die, their families could die. Their whole way of life could come to an end, and they'll become a client state, which is just where they're all enslaved to American companies to make oil for them, or whatever. But these people who are in these positions, they don't have the motivation to win these wars because it's just, whatever. Most of them, it's just making money, maybe. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time too, it's like the people who are coming up with the innovations and doing the engineering to make these products work, to make the actual technological hardware of these of warfare function. They're not the ones who are making tons of money anyways either. So then it's not even necessarily a financial motivation. They just show up to work and do what they're told. But the Iranians have actual real will to win. They have to win. They have to win. They have to win for their livelihoods and for their country. We don't have to win. It doesn't really matter. Hezbollah, they have to win because they have to defend their families from the Israelis. The Israelis could just stop. Like, the Israelis don't have to fucking do this shit. But and then there's another factor too, which is like tactically, we're set in a backwards sort of tactical concept where the military and the politicians in the United States, they actually think that if they just kill the leaders of a country, that they just win. And it just doesn't work like that. I mean, let me give an example here. In the French Revolution, right, after, like, in the middle of it, towards the end of it, they started fighting wars with like every single country in Europe, right? That eventually became the Napoleonic Wars, but it didn't start out as Napoleon's project. It was the new French government's project. and they were ended up the military leadership in France ended up becoming extremely capable. Napoleon gets all the credit for this, but like he had all these field marshals and all these people below him who were probably just as talented and just as capable as him. Um, Part of that reason, was something that I suspect is that the the generals and the military leadership before the French Revolution, they were just incompetent, fail sons.
Yeah.
Basically, it was like so and so is going to run the army because he's the son of the Duke of
Mm.
wherever the fuck, and he comes from a prestigious family, and that's just the way it is. And that was the whole military. Well, guess what happened? During the French Revolution, they literally decapitated all of their leadership. And guess what? As far as far as the actual um, the functioning of that country, it made them function better. Like
Yeah.
there is a very serious argument to be made that decapitation actually improves your
Mm.
society
Mm.
because realistically, the most replaceable person in any institution, it's not the people who are doing the actual work. It's not the laborers. It's not the people at the bottom. You always need people at the bottom to make something work. Even people in the middle, maybe it's important to kind of they're somewhat important, but they can also be shifted around to an extent. But the people on the top are the most replaceable people in any sort of organization. They
Right.
should be, at least for it to be a good, solid, um, something that is a strong institution.
Yeah.
Um, because individuals are not really that important for a large organization, or they shouldn't be if the organization is going to be capable.
Mm.
And that's what I think what we've seen with like Hezbollah, Iran. The decapitation of their leadership. I think there's an argument to be made that it improves their functioning of their society. It
Oh,
makes
totally.
room for somebody who is lower, maybe lower down, and they're ambitious and they're capable, and they haven't been given the opportunities that they really should have. And now all of a sudden, they get to move up,
Right.
and there's new ideas that are introduced. Um, there's new blood and leadership in that position, and you know, at the end of the day, that those experiences that are not necessarily somebody who's been there 1,000 years and just does the same thing every fucking day
Yeah.
is not necessarily what is needed in a kinetic war. You need fresh blood, fresh ideas, fresh leadership. And if you're just killing the leadership over and over again, that can actually be a good thing.
Yeah, you're doing is like survival of the fittest in a way, Like we have these chickens out here, and if for the broilers at least, which take almost 10 weeks from start to finish, it's like if we have some that are not walking, that are underweight, like we're gonna cull them because we're not gonna let them just keep eating feed and not keep gaining weight, and making it harder to move them, right? And they'll get picked on too, right? So it's like you create a healthier, stronger herd by culling that out. And it's like the more and more you do that to any population, right? The more and more you kill people who can't survive, well, the stronger will be the people who, are left. So that's what they've done to Iran. They've hardened them, and especially by killing all these old timers and all these soft, I wouldn't even say soft liners, but like moderates, you know, in Iran is like, well, yeah, they have this stupid sort of idea that Europe has about Putin, right? That if you take out Putin, all the liberal Democrats will take over. It's like, no, all the like, Stalinist communists and all the like hyper conservative, like, we need to accelerate war against the decadent West, people will take over, right? Like that's what happened with Iran. You've killed all these people who were moderates, who went through a war a long time ago against Iraq and said, we need to, avoid that at all costs. We need to, play nice because, America's crazy and we know how destructive they can be. We need to, at all costs, tread lightly, versus the new, like you said, the newer, younger blood who are like, no, I think we can fight this. I think we could use these new tactics. I think we've built up all this. I think we can use this, and they're ready to struggle, I think that's very important to recognize. And most of the people in America who run large-scale organizations that I've been a part with, the idea that they might at some point, at random, get murdered for the organization that they run would totally be anathema to any thought that they've ever had, basically. And if they had that thought, they would immediately run away to fucking the U.S. Virgin Islands and never come back, if you know what I mean, right? So that mentality itself, R.I.P. Ali Larijani, an amazing leader, got murdered, right? He got murdered. So now whoever replaces him, not only do they have to have the caliber of diplomacy, strategic military thinking, geopolitical analysis, all these skills. Not only do they have to step up and meet that, but they have to be literally braver than them because they know at any point that they could be murdered. So the type of person who steps into that role is a person who's literally willing to give their life for a project. And I always say, like you said, what are Americans willing to give up? Like, I don't know, their job at most, right? Like, that's about
we'll
it.
give stuff up for money. Like, that's
money
seems to be the main. That's like the main motivator for.
I mean, in America, if there was someone at Anduril who would maybe develop the new AI drone technology that would maybe be sort of a 1 week game changer in the drone warfare sphere, if that person was like, damn, you have to move to Boston away from San Francisco, they probably wouldn't take the job. They'd probably be like, I can work at this insurance company and get paid $200,000, a year to do like this high level coding that nobody does. So that's the difference. That's the difference. Versus somebody in Iran who's like, damn, I've studied for fucking 40 years to learn like trajectories of like hypersonic missiles. And it's very competitive in Iran for engineers and mathematicians and people in the military, right? And I've been picked out of, such a large pool of these people, and I'm going to work in this underground bunker. That person is willing to die, to give their life, die, and that dude, we don't even know the name of somebody like that. Okay, yeah. So that is the difference. And that will always win out. It will always win out. So there's no way, there is no sort of like, maybe America can do some retaliation and get Iran into a point where they can like kind of both concede things to each other, and then Trump can make some sort of slick political exit with a new thing that looks like the JCPOA, but it's somehow better for him, And also, can I say really quick, I know we're almost at time now because I got to close these chickens up, but this idea that the JCPOA was like somehow a bad deal for America, I need to set the record straight because this is such an asinine idea, because the JCPOA was basically Obama and his administration going to Iran and saying, hey, you guys have to stop enriching uranium, at least above like 6% or whatever, and we have to do inspections, year on year, month on month, and all those people who are inspectors are actually going to be Israeli agents, And we're going to do this for about, years and years and years, probably like 10, what was it, like about 10 years or something. And in return, we're going to say that we're going to unfreeze your assets and give you sanctions relief. But actually, the first day of signing the agreement, we will sanction the largest bank in Iran. Okay, folks, this is the best deal in all possible worlds. In all possible worlds. Number one, under international law, Iran can't make a nuclear weapon, let alone enrich nuclear material. Number two, they have literally the international community watching over them at any point and moment and waiting for them to say, oh, you violated this, we need to do snapback sanctions. Number three, you have Israeli agents mapping out all their critical infrastructure, right? Israel, or was it Rafael Grossi, right? This guy who works for the IAEA, who turned out to literally just be either an idiot and hacked his shit, or just handing off information about Fordo and Isfahan to the Israelis, right, and the Americans. And on top of all of that, people think that Iran was getting sanctions relief when at the end of the day the State Department was doing more sanctions. Okay, so you had your cake and you ate it too. You had a deal where you made sure that these people didn't get a nuclear weapon and they didn't enrich any uranium, and you made it, and you tricked them, and you didn't give anything for it, right? You did what Trump does. You just, make a deal and lie about it. But people actually thought that it was a real deal, right? So you had the most, it was the most perfect deal that you could have imagined, drawn up for any neocon, right? At least any liberal interventionist neocon. And Trump, in his utter stupidity, which is why I love him sometimes, his utter stupidity to go, that's lib, that's Obama being gay and lib, rip it all up, we can do better. Destroying this carefully crafted, rules-based order sort of, fraud that everyone thinks is legitimate, and Trump going, no, that's some liberal bullshit, we can do better than that, when really you can't. And now you've destroyed the whole foundation that you had for projecting hegemony over this country. And I'm glad that he ripped it up, because you'll never get anything as good as that ever, ever, for this foreseeable future. And I hope he does the same thing. Continues to do the same thing with NATO, right? I hope he continues to rip up any semblance of allyship there. Thinking that he's going to somehow get some one over, get both, have your cake and eat it too. Like have power projection in Europe, but also have them just like paying for all your weapons and not really actually protecting them. It's like, well, isn't that literally what just happened in the Middle East? Like what happens when Russia fucking, does an Ereshnik strike in Poland against a command and control center that was like sending drones their way, and the Americans can do nothing? What happens then? Well, you've made yourself a target now. That's what happens. And just like the GCC countries are starting to reevaluate and move towards Iran and Pakistan and China and Russia and go, maybe America's a liability. Maybe it's not a shield, it's a liability, and it's a target. The very same things will start to happen in Eastern Europe, mark my words, if Russia really does start to play hardball. Maybe people will go, well, maybe Belarus had it right. Maybe these countries that are on the border with Russia and have some sort of good diplomatic ties, but maintain connections with the EU, maybe they have it right, and maybe we shouldn't be so craven and celebrate the deaths of as many Russians as we can, because they will just strike us in our capital with a missile that we can't intercept. And the Americans aren't going to come to our help. That they're going to be striking their bases. They're going to be targets in our own countries, right? So I think the Ukraine war, I think people haven't talked about this enough. The connections, the mirroring between aspects of the Ukraine war and the Iran war are very interesting to me. I think I noticed this when we were looking at Brent crude prices, right? And we were seeing when it was like up at like 110. When was the last time that happened? Well, that was under Biden, and that's when they started the Ukraine war and oil spiked, right? So there are a lot of similarities here, and this is just the second front in a huge. This is all one war, realistically, which is very important to underscore. This is all one war, eventually against China, right? To encircle China, to pick off any of its neighbors, but eventually against China. And we all know who is fighting it: America, the West, Israel, all of its NATO allies. And all these people that are evil and malevolent, basically. And they're fighting against some of the most moral, some of the most historied cultures that have been there for eons, right? Time and millennia. And they really think in their hubris that they can do some sort of weird little proxy war, do some sort of airstrike, do some sort of decapitation thing, do some sort of color revolution, somewhere around these huge historied countries, and that they'll just fall. It's just delusional. It's completely delusional.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of hilarious thing about it, too, is that it's, Iran's going to gain big from this, but the U.S. could have just not done anything and maintained its control of that region for a lot longer.
Totally.
Like, maybe for another 10 years. Who knows? For a long time. But now
totally
though,
an own goal. Totally an own.
Yeah.
They've accelerated this. Same thing with Ukraine, right? Right. Like, this is perfect parallel here.
It's just the greed of not having every single thing you want.
Yeah.
Leads you to flip the board over. And now guess what? Now you got nothing.
Make rash decisions. No, totally. I mean, if you look at Russia, right? Let me just turn the light on. It's totally getting dark. This is going to be maybe my last statement. Then I'll see what you think about it, and then we'll sign off. Look at the Ukraine war in the similar way that this was such an own goal with the Iran war, where if we hadn't done this, Iran wouldn't have seized the Strait of Hormuz and had this toll, right, or taken out all of our bases. Like, that would never have happened.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have happened, like you said, 10, 20, 30, 40 years later when they found out, oh, hey, we're strong enough to do it now, or something else happened. But that wouldn't have happened if Israel, which is us, hadn't striked them unprovoked, right, and started this war. Same thing with the Ukraine-Russia thing. Do you really think that BRICS pay would have been a thing if we hadn't cut Russia off from the SWIFT banking system? No. I mean, maybe it would have been in 10, 20, 30 years. Do you really think the NDB, the National Development Bank, would have been making the strides it's making right now if we hadn't, if there weren't people in Russia with Visa cards registered out of sight of Russia that woke up one day and go, oh, all my assets are frozen, I can't use this. This is insanity. We pushed them towards this. Russia has multiple pipelines with Germany. Some are still could be operational. They've said this. Putin said, I could flip the switch tomorrow. He said, that's a quote. This is insanity. And we literally blew it up. We exploded it. We exploded the relationship metaphorically and physically. And what has that done? Well, any rational actor who's experiencing this is going to go, okay, I'm not going to deal with these people because they're fucking crazy and they want to kill me and they've pushed me away. They've pushed me out of their economic sphere of influence. So what am I going to do? Lay down and die? That's what they really think. That's what they really think every country's a Venezuela, right? Where it's so tenuous that they'll just lay down and just let them just get fucked in the ass. And it's just, Russia is too big of a country for that. They have nukes. They're not going to do that. They didn't do that. And guess what? They started developing BRICS. They started developing closer ties with China. They started developing missile technology with Iran. And talk about countries that punch above their weight. North Korea, right? Very developed right now, which I'm glad I remembered this. Let's just screen share this article here, because on the last episode we talked about this. This is the Wall Street Journal, folks. The Wall Street Journal. The journal that is of the street that used to have a wall dividing the Indians from the speculative Europeans. Okay? That's what this outlet is. Let's read this headline. The world's most surprising economic success story is North Korea? Whoa! Oh my, no, how's it? Oh my god, no way! That doesn't make any sense. How could it, what? How? I don't know, because we said it's true, because we know things. I don't know, that's how. Because guess what? They have nuclear weapons and they do central planning and they're communists. I don't know. They do smart things. I mean, it's so simple, folks. And we talked about this, and here it is. Right, one day after, they're acknowledging it now. This is so anathema. This would an article like this would never have come out in 2012, 1992. Never. Now you can go to Pyongyang and take a fucking picture and go, well, I mean, that is a picture that you took in Pyongyang. You can't deny it. You can't deny it, folks. They're nuclear armed. They'll never be invaded. Hopefully, thank God. And they're projecting power because they centrally planned their military. And guess what? They're probably selling a lot of military technology to other countries like Iran. And let me just leave you with this. Pepe Escobar and Larry Johnson dropped some exclusive scoops, which I have no clue if it's true or not. Apparently, according to their source, which is apparently so close to Mojtaba Khomeini, the new Ayatollah, that they have a personal relationship with them. Apparently, that's what some of their sources said, that Mojtaba Khomeini, in a phone call with the Pakistani foreign minister, said, if it comes to it, within 2 weeks, we can produce a nuclear weapon and do a demonstration of said nuclear weapon, which is a kind of a game changer for Iran, because the previous Ayatollah Khomeini, Mojtaba's father, had issued a fatwa saying that, it's under Shia law, it's irreligious to produce a nuclear weapon because it kills too many civilians, So that was, not only was it a political calculation, but it was like a moral calculation. And now I think the rumors are that it's reached a point where deterrence it's more important now. And it seems like, I don't know if this is true, but I really do trust these people. So it seems like maybe with help of North Korea, maybe with help of Russia, or maybe fully domestically developed, because this is obviously a technology from the 60s and people know how to do this.
From the 30s.
From the 30s, hide your moms, right? That they may now have, or in an extremely small timeline, can create a nuclear bomb. I mean, who could have predicted this? And guess what? None of this would have happened if we hadn't done this.
No.
Right? Netanyahu's been saying for 30
Yeah.
years, oh my God, they're going to get a nuclear weapon. They never wanted one until 100 days ago, right?
And also, let's just be clear, too. It's these people who are saying this, they're liars in the American government, who are saying they're concerned about Iranian nuclear. They're liars. They don't care. It's a pretext for war.
Right.
That's all it is. That's what they did with Saddam. That they're just developing. They're just creating a reason.
Yeah.
That was probably the whole reason for the JCPOA, why they pulled out. They're just trying to create a pretext to go to war with them, because they want to expand American influence in the region. I mean, they don't actually really give a shit. They probably, they know, all the intelligence agencies in the United States say like they're not developing nuclear weapons. So they're just lying. they're evil liars. Like that's all they do. They're lying so they can start lying for the worst reason you could lie, which is not even to just cover your ass,
Yeah.
just so you
Kill
can
people.
try and so you can start a war and steal resources from people and enslave an entire population. Like they're honest to God, like these managers, these like political managers in the American bureaucracy. God, I mean, they're just the worst people ever. Like they really should. I mean, we need to. It's a serious problem. Like I wish that somebody would start doing decapitation strikes on America because
yes,
it's
truly.
they're just horrible.
Yeah.
Like and there's no end in sight too, because if you kill 100 of them, there's 1,000 more to take their place. There's just so many of these fucking people.
They're just pumping
Like
them out of Johns Hopkins. And,
they really there's millions of them.
Yeah.
There's honest to God, there's millions of them, and they're
true.
all each one is worse than the other one.
Yeah.
Like I can just think of you could just pick a lot of people off the street in America. I mean, most Americans are good people. Like 70% of Americans are just chill, cool people. But like, there's like 30% of America who are just these. They're just the worst. They're just the worst. They're just honestly like they really don't. I mean, they've just been so lied to, and they're just so beaten down, and their views are so distorted that people really just have like this arrogance of how they view the rest of the world, where they really think like these other countries like China and Russia and Iran, like they think that we have a better government than them. Like they really think that.
It's so laughable. It's so laughable. And you know what? I had a thought the other day which totally encapsulates what you're saying, because and we are both, hashtag coastal elites. You got the West Coast, I got the East Coast. So we've both been around the two flavors of these people. But, I mean, I grew up in Baltimore, which has a lot of, like, high-level federal bureaucrats. Maryland is, like, if you work for the federal government, you probably live in Virginia or Maryland. So I know a lot of these people. I've experienced them. I grew up in this culture. And I was just thinking the other day, because I've been to Connecticut, I've been to Boston, I've been to these, Alexandria, Virginia. For God's sakes, if you're there, please blow your brains out or move to China. Those are the only two options. Because these people are so horrible. And I was just thinking the other day, like, literally, how many of, because there's it's not a small subclass, like you say. How many of these people have you met that are, play lacrosse, or like Zionists, or in a frat sorority, right? Like will become, I don't know, assistant undersecretary of state somehow just because they know somebody. You go to almost every single college and higher educational institution in America. There are a decent amount of these people. A decent, like you say, maybe 30% are these people. And it's a problem. It's really a problem because this is such
it's higher in the colleges. It's a higher percentage of it.
No, it's probably most
just
of
a normal person off the street is you're gonna find somebody who's like a good American, but like you go to higher education.
Ooh, it's not pretty, folks. It's not like Iran. I'm sure you go to Iran, you meet a lot of very smart, very creative, very driven, hard, real meritocracy, hard fucking working people. Somebody fucking grew up in a fucking village milking goats and shit, made that shit out, Not in America. Not in America. You have the exact opposite, the inverse, the most spoiled, the most fail son, right? This is the problem. And they're so craven. And their mind it's the way they think about the world is so ridiculous, but these are the people who float up to the top, and they float up to the top because they are like that. Specifically because they are able to think in such a deficient way. So they're able to take orders from the ruling class and say these insane things because they themselves are insane and not bat an eye. And so that's the problem, because so that's what happens is you have this huge class of people who think like this. Yeah, and your average person who work. I worked a 12-hour day. I'm about to go end this episode and work another hour. It's going to be a 13-hour day. Yesterday was a 13-hour day. I think for most Americans who do that, it brings a sort of presence of mind where you hate the right people. Hopefully, you hate. Man, I was on the farm today and I saw a box of ticks drop, and I really fucking hate Bill Gates. You know what I mean? Like you understand that when you're around these people, Harvard, law school, UPenn, School of Business, Johns Hopkins, School of Foreign Policy, whatever. These are craven individuals. We have both experienced them personally. And the mentality is it is that of a latent rabid dog. It's very scary. It's very hard to describe for a foreign audience, but yeah, it's not good. It's not good, and these are the people who run our country. And we need. I think we were discussing this too when we had a Pol Pot kind of back and forth. What we need is a cultural revolution in America. That's what we need. We need to send these people to the countryside, right? We need to get them a Maoist re-education, because they're so deficient in their thinking that it's like only through, hard physical voluntary labor are some of these people really going to rethink this. And some of them some of them are too far gone.
Well, I'll tell you what. That's what the economic collapse in this country is going to be. We don't even need to do that to anybody. It's just that you just let the capitalist class run this country the way that they normally would run it, and it's just going to lead us into economic despair and degradation. Like we really do. I think there's part of this arrogance comes from the belief that we kind of think we're immune from. Especially these kind of this crust of people who are just kind of insufferable. They really think they're kind of immune from any sort of economic issues because they kind of have been for a long time, especially if you're going to UPenn or something like that. But the reality is that that we're going to find out, and people even will still laugh at you if you tell it. They don't believe that this is possible. They don't really believe that this is what we're actually sort of culminating towards is an economic depression that destroys America. And I think that's always been the threat, even more so before all of this geopolitical stuff that is now funneling into a downward spiral of an economic depression. I think that was even really a pretty realistic outcome that we were careening towards before all this stuff happened, and now I think it's probably inevitable. I'm always surprised again by the ability for them to delay it, but I think I've read enough history. I've seen enough of what happens in the world, and I've seen enough theory to understand that this is sort of inevitable. And these people don't even recognize that that's what we're coming to. I mean, the liberal ones they'll go on and on about how humanity is evil and human. We have to. The problem is there's too many humans, and we just have to get rid of. We just need a smaller population. America's just too big. There's just too many people. They have these, and it's no. If the problem isn't the number of people, it's the system and the leadership. It's not. The average person is not evil. The average a baby that come out of somebody, not just I can't wait to kill people. You learn that shit and are taught that shit. And then if you're in the right position, you get promoted to CEO of ExxonMobil when you start doing that. It's capitalism, and it's more than anything else is capitalism and imperialism.
Yeah.
And the people that are in these roles, they're like actors playing a part. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter who's cast for the role. You
Mm-hmm.
still got to read the same lines.
It's an amazing metaphor.
So I think when it finally happens, it's going to be a radicalizing moment, and I don't know if we really need the cultural revolution, because I think the reality of the situation of our economy is going to be radicalizing enough.
Right.
We need to sort of, I mean, maybe we will do it, because like,
I would like to do
fuck,
it too,
it's
but
gonna be it's gonna be pretty insufferable. Like the cast of people who are left. I
yeah.
think a lot of these sort of redundant people who believe these lies, they're going to be cast into disarray too,
Yeah.
and they're going to be radicalized, and they're going to become Marxists and socialists, and
And fascists, but
yeah, and fascists, right? Or
we'll see where
maybe some
you
of
know.
them become gay, retarded anarchists.
Yeah. Ew, yeah, but they'll have a development. And this is I like to call this the millionaire middle class. That's what I like to call it. Which I am a part of, or well, not really me, but my family is. And I've seen this, and I've seen it is quite the contradiction, because right, they aren't ruling class, they aren't even quite petty bourgeoisie, right? It's not like they really own businesses, but they have these extremely high paying desk jobs, these fake jobs, that are probably bureaucratic in nature, or they have a lot of institutional cachet, right? They're experts and whatnot. Yeah, and they have this mentality that they, like you say, are untouchable. That they
Yeah,
are they're undefeatable, that they're invincible, and
I think it is sort of an invincibility mindset where
invincibility, and but not even. It's hard for us to explain it, because they wouldn't even necessarily say that in those terms, but they latently, it's like it's like unconscious for them that it will, nothing will ever be able to hurt them, pretty much.
right, and what's an invincibility sort of mindset in that, like, as long as you do what you're told
Right.
and you follow the system, then
You're good.
you're fine. There's
Yeah.
nothing bad can really happen to you.
Right, because that's been their whole life, and they don't know anything else. So this is, once again, this is my left accelerationism, is to be like, we need to feel more pain, right? We need to feel that reality that almost every other country that we are, aligned against, has felt to a certain degree. We need to feel that. Oh fuck, I can't buy medicine. Oh fuck, there's no gas in the fucking pump. Oh fuck. Oh, and then a person like us, we already understand this. We're prepared a little bit for it. We understand what's going to happen. It's still going to hurt us, but a person who makes decision, is maybe a mid to high level bureaucrat, maybe has some sort of institutional, social, cachet in the government, whatever. If they start to understand that on a visceral level, and they've never understood that before, that, like you said, can be a radicalizing moment for them. Who knows what's going to happen? Good or worse. It could get worse. But
Yeah. And
it would be something different.
I honestly, I don't even think it's that they need to. It's just that they will.
It's nature. Yeah.
It's just this is just how capitalism works.
Right.
It's not. There's no capitalist society that has just walked away from like all the hardship that it creates inevitably, and just been like, we figured it out.
Right. Yeah.
Like, let's be realistic here. Like, no one in our leadership has any sort of plan, to fix any of this shit. Like, it's not. Nothing has been resolved.
Right.
Nothing has even been resolved since the 2008 crisis,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
All they really did was just print a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And issue a bunch of government debt.
Yeah, no, it's like, instead of a housing bubble, we have like a car loan bubble now. Like, what's next? Oh, we're going to have a fucking bubble for, like, buying toasters with loans? Like, you know?
Right. I mean, it's crazy. Like, think about how much the average vehicle in the United States, like, how much more expensive is it now than it was 10, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, a pretty average new car is like
Yeah.
$50,000. Like, who the fuck can afford that? Nobody has that. I mean, most people really don't. Even these people who are like bureaucrats who have like good jobs on paper, it's like they have to finance
Right.
that.
It's all credit. It's all credit. And look, I mean, the car example is perfect because $50,000 the average. That means it's not that hard to find a new car, which is not top of the line and costs $100,000. Okay,
Yeah, it's
and
not. Yeah,
and think like you just said, 2026, 2006. You could buy a house for $100,000 in 2006.
yeah,
A fairly nice one,
yeah. You
right?
could.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the difference within 20 years. Okay, what do we think is going to happen in the next 10 years? Do we think it's going to get better or worse, folks? Let's look at the
Right.
trend line. Like, let's be realistic here. Like, we can't be delusional, right? We have
I
to have
mean,
an analysis here. You know, we can't just
like,
be like, oh, I'm going to eventually own a home. And when a car note as much as a home was, right?
right. Well, I mean, what are they gonna do? You know, with
Yeah.
all they're doing is printing more money and going more into debt. Like, what are they realistically gonna do? The debt burden on the taxpayer is 20% of your taxes goes to pay off the interest on the debt.
Mm,
Like that is it's $1 trillion a year now.
yeah.
Just for the interest on the debt
Yep.
that the government spends. It's 39 now. I mean, but before the year's up, it'll be 40.
Yep. Yep.
And you know, with this war, they want to. And now Trump wants to spend another $500 million on the military. It's like this is not. They can't just keep accelerating spending
Yeah.
when the economy is collapsing. When we don't have the money, it's going to devalue the whole currency. And I mean, as we talked about too, it's not like more money is going to make the U.S. military stronger.
Yeah. Right.
They have too much money at this
Right.
point. They need
That's the
less
problem.
money to
Yeah.
become stronger.
Yeah.
They need to actually take a second and like figure out what to do with the resources they have in a
Yeah.
smart way. Oh, we just need to lose just paper.
Yeah. Now we just need a new jet that's also a helicopter plus also a plane. We just need a new tank that's also an armored vehicle carrier and
We'll
also
build right. Let's build like a bunch more obsolete,
Yeah.
expensive weapons that
Yeah.
we're just gonna get
like the
destroyed.
rifle. Have you heard about the new rifle that's replacing the AR? I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole. It's just the classic Pentagon thing where it's like they're trying to get a rifle that's like high caliber, really light, and also can fire really far and like uses the certain like right. And what they end up getting instead of the best of both worlds is the worst of all possible
Oh,
worlds.
yeah,
That's really expensive and really not that good, right?
It just doesn't work very well because
Exactly.
it's just engineeringly. It's like some dude came up with a concept of what they want, and engineers
Yes.
like, I can't make this work.
I guess I'll do some weird, yeah, and it'll break. And an AK-47 from like 1972 is a superior weapon, right? You know, and cheaper and made a million times over, right? So this is
Right.
the classic, the
Right, and
story
who
of
invented-
America.
What country invented that weapon? Right.
Right. Still uses a version of it to this day. So because it's tried and true and trusted technology that they've iterated on. Can you believe it? Here's my prediction. I'm just gonna say it. I know we haven't been doing predictions for a while, but I liked that discussion. My prediction is that America will go bankrupt, insolvent. I don't know when. Whatever. Fuck the timelines. I'm tired of people being like, but Phil, the economy didn't collapse like 2 weeks ago like you said it would. Okay, bitch, wait a couple months or years or whatever. It's gonna happen, all right? And you're gonna be like, oh my god, I should have listened to fucking Phil instead of whatever. I think we are gonna go bankrupt. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Like you said, it's fully closed right now. It's not the tolls. Not you can't just fucking make Japan go there, pay $2 million, and siphon off half of their oil that got out. No, it's closed. If we can't have Gulf states prop up our bond market will collapse, and we will not be able to fund the American government. It's that simple. It's that simple. So that might happen soon. It might happen later. I mean, I don't know.
I think
it's gonna happen.
I mean, it's kind of happening already. Like the whole. First of all, I mean, I would say that there's a good argument to be made that the American government is already bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
If they're running these massive deficits, and they have been, and they have all this debt, that's not a
right.
That's not a country that has a bunch of reserve resources. Yeah. So I think, I mean, you might even that might even just be a description of what
it's just currently insolvent. It's like a dead man walking. Already kind of knows he's dead. Is just continuing to walk, continuing to get more credit, even though it can never actually pay down the interest, let alone the principal.
Right. I mean, but I mean, look at the bonds that they're issuing. Like, nobody even trusts these bonds. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of people or institutions that were buying the 30-year U.S. Treasuries, which were like the gold standard of 4% interest for 30 years. Great fucking deal.
Yeah.
Now nobody even believes nobody's really buying these 30-year bonds. It's like it's over 5%. The yield is over 5% for the 30 years.
Yeah.
And because nobody. Who believes they're going to get their money back in 30 years from the U.S. government? Like, it's not a stable organization. Even the 10 years, it's like those aren't doing well. What are people buying? What are they issuing? What's the Treasury issuing right now to fund the government?
I'll tell you what they're buying. They're buying panda bonds from Deutsche Bank. Germany's fucking selling Chinese bonds. That's what everybody wants now.
Right. Well, somebody is buying the U.S. bonds right now. People are buying the U.S. bonds right now, but they're not buying 10-year bonds. They're buying 2-year and 6 months bonds.
That's bad.
Because that's how much is trusted. Like, I'll loan you this money for 6 months. Like, I don't know how much longer you're going to be around after that.
People don't have. Yeah, that's a crazy figure. Wow, I did not know that. The 6 months.
That's why the interest keeps getting so much higher.
Wow.
It's because.
So people are literally betting that that America will be able to pay back bonds at 6 months to 2 years, maybe, and not 10 to 30 years. That's what the market's saying already in the
right. They don't. I mean, those are the ones that are in higher demand, and those are the ones because they're in higher demand that like Scott Bessent decided to, that's predominantly how they're they're financing the whole government right now is they're issuing 2 and 6 months of these like short-term bonds.
Wow.
But that just means they mature faster.
Yeah.
So you have to pay even more money on them earlier.
Wow. Do you have a prediction? I'm sorry, I'm kind of behind. I got to do like night chores right now. Probably some fox has killed like 2 chickens. So I got to put that in the Slack when that happens. So, you have a prediction or any parting things to say? Any analysis?
I'll stick with the prediction I made earlier. I mean, I believe at some point during this conflict, like we're building towards a U.S. ship being sunk. Of some kind, I don't know. Maybe it's even happened already. I don't know.
Right, but they've lied.
I think it's. I think that's the Iranians are going to get fed up, and at some point they have the capacity to do it, and I think they are going to sink either destroyer, maybe a carrier.
That would be crazy, and inshallah that they do. And they've definitely hit them before, but I don't think a confirmed sink has happened.
Well, I think they're launching stuff at them that they are not really. I don't think they're really trying to sink the ships.
Well, they launched drones at them to take out the people on the deck. Yeah,
it's like you've gotten too close. You're in range. Get out of our space. But one of these fucking captains or admirals gets an itch and one of our politicians just decides. Get that ship off the coast and we're going to bomb us. The Iranians, I think, they're patient. Their leadership is patient. I mean, and, it's like Russian leadership, where we keep expecting them to kind of commit more, but
Yeah,
I think they're a little bit less patient than the Russians.
for sure. For
I think
sure.
they're a little bit more willing to take a they're a proud people.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily um, gonna take it anymore. I mean, also they did kill their leader, who was probably one of the main people restraining all of them, and
They
they
can
got
do that,
his
yeah.
son in power. And,
They killed all the
you know,
people that were like, maybe we shouldn't do
yeah,
asymmetric war.
it's probably not a good idea to just kill the family of the
Yeah.
guy who's running the country.
Like his
I don't know,
dad,
maybe
his
he's
wife, his
the life.
kid type of shit. Like, yeah, like, okay, what are you trying to do? Make a Hollywood movie arc for this man to, like, usurp you, you know? Like, you're just doing everything right for him.
They just did a Dune. They duned
Yeah.
fucking Iran.
They literally
They did a whole. They didn't watch the movie Dune, I guess. Ooh,
Yeah.
what happens to the Baron at the end of Dune?
Yes. We should sit down the Trump administration and just make them watch Dune and be like, all right,
Honestly,
now what did we
yeah,
learn?
it is crazy though. Like literally the parallels of Dune. It's just first of all, it's like they do a trap to try and trap the leaders of this great nation, and then they do a decapitation strike to so they can control all of this like super important resource that's used for transportation. And then they just start killing a bunch of people, and that leads to like an uprising. They kill they kill the father of the great the great nation, and his son becomes the leader of this new nation. And then that nation like has an uprising that becomes unstoppable and takes out like this really great powerful empire. Like I mean, they just dune themselves.
Dune.
Like
Never go full Dune, bro. That's what I always say. Yeah.
I mean, I guess Frank Herbert is either like a genius who just I don't know, man. I mean, that shit kind of predicted the future,
Yeah.
but history always kind of repeats itself, right? It just sort of follows these cycles. Amazing as it is, because you know, it's not like people who are in power are not like don't have access to books.
Yeah, it's not like this never happened before. This happened like a lot, like probably countless times to countless civilizations. Like have done stupid stuff like this, and you could have, if you just read books, you know, you'd know. But it's funny,
but it's not.
You just don't. So
right, but like let's be clear too that they're not there because they make smart decisions. They're there because they make bad decisions.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like you said, yeah. They're there because they're craven and they're able to make these crazy decisions. Well, God willing, all those people die, and that something new happens in America. But we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see. They'll get taught a lesson, though. Yeah,
or that everybody else just kind of comes over to where we're at, where we're socialists. You know, I don't dislike these people. I mean, I dislike the things that people believe who are like these liberals and leftists or I mean I guess but these like liberals or conservatives or people who are like institutionally like believe in the system. You know, I don't dislike the people as much as I just dislike their beliefs. And I think that, you know, they're just misguided.
Yeah. And
they haven't been given, they haven't been presented the evidence in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
They haven't
experienced it, which I think is important.
Yeah,
they haven't experienced it. And yeah, we know a lot of these people personally, and some of these people are friends, you know, totally, who think very stupid things, very foolish, outlandish things. And yeah, we hope that you know, one day it'll become so ever presently clear that those things are outlandish, you know, and stupid. That all these people will realize, you know, it may happen. But yeah, until then, thanks everybody for watching. This is episode 11.